Thank you. Is this on? Great.
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman Wiseau and members of the committee. I've been asked to talk about the economic and job effects of Prop 39. I know you've had a long 2 hours of testimony, so I'm going to give you a very high-level picture of what we know about the jobs and what that universe is. It is not the tax code, but it is very complicated, so I'll try and describe that generally. I have a couple charts to show you, but nothing too overwhelming. So I want to talk to you about the universe of jobs, how we measure it, and what we know about it. And I want to say before I start a word on the significance of this undertaking. Prop 39 is the first clean energy policy in this state that requires actual workforce reporting. So there's a lot of talks about jobs and clean energy. This measure actually requires us to take stock of those jobs in real time. So we're going to get the most accurate jobs data to date to track the state's efforts to address climate change and provide insight on how to best structure future clean energy programs. So we are building a mechanism and a database and a way to measure jobs that we haven't had before. So we're tremendously excited about this for the work of this project and down the line in the future. We are working, my colleague, Carol Zabin from the Don Weil Center for Jobs in the Green Economy at the University of California, Berkeley, has had to step away. We are working with, as my colleague Tim Rainey mentioned, we are working with UC Berkeley to actually crunch the numbers of the data that we do have. And we do have a report coming out at the end of this month, actually early next month, for the Citizens Oversight Board, talking about exactly the materials I'm going to tell you about today. But what we hope to get, and what I'm going to tell you about today, is this: we have a roadmap of the full job impact analysis that's going to be possible as this project evolves, right, and as we gather more robust data. So today, let me say something about the universe of jobs. This chart represents the whole universe of investment and, by extension, the expected jobs impact. So as you heard this morning, let me just say there are very different areas of investment. You know this well. But there are also correspondingly different job impacts. And those job impacts are tracked in very different ways by different organizations. So this is just the beginning of the complexity. We know that the K-12 Energy Savings Program with the LEAs is overseen by the CEC. It is the largest program to which more than 80% of the funding will go on average. And that's the kind of jobs that we're going to talk about today, the ones in that blue pot. But we also have, obviously, the community college projects, which are coordinated by the Chancellor's Office. They have their own measures, as you heard, for counting and measuring those jobs. The Conservation Corps, similarly, although a much smaller piece of this pie, has their own methods for tracking and counting jobs. So we already have several organizations and systems for what kind of jobs are we talking about and who's tracking them. I want to talk about what's the most exciting piece for us and the thing that we're going to have direct data on, which is the K through 12 LEA jobs that are created as a result of this work. And another thing I want to say is there's so much talk about jobs. I think it's very important to be very clear what we mean when we say that. So when we talk about job creation, we are talking about direct jobs. So how many people are actually working on these projects, right? But when you look at the kind of job impacts that have been estimated around this project and that are standard economic practice, that will be only a fraction of the economic impact of this. So that whole bright green area, for every job created working on energy efficiency or other forms of clean energy work, there's anywhere from 1 to 3 additional jobs created. Right? So the indirect and induced jobs are a huge measure of economic impact, where indirect jobs are jobs created up and down the supply chain by this work, sort of people who are working to produce the materials, as well as the induced jobs, which means the money that flows into local communities when local construction workers are actually making money and spending it in their communities. So that's something to remember about. We talk about jobs, but there's a series of related categories of jobs to keep in mind. Today, I'm just going to talk about the direct jobs that are a result of the local education area investments. And that breaks out like this. So this is, again, a chart based on the total program allocation that becomes a proxy for the total universe of jobs in the K-12 sphere. So this is not talking about the community colleges or the cores here, but it is the largest chunk of jobs. So within this, it's important to remember that sort of that little wedge, the 10%, that's the money that went out for planning. That creates its own set of jobs. The remaining money The remaining investment is going to create the sort of blue and purple jobs. And we know that construction projects in California, according to the economic census, about 30% of those jobs end up being white-collar jobs. And we'll be able to get better data on that once we know the actual universe of jobs. That big purple wedge, that's where most of the jobs are. That's the blue-collar jobs on contracted construction jobs for K-12. This is important because we actually have payroll records that track this for the first time. I should say, I just wanted one other comment to say about this. As I said, this is contracted jobs. There's another bucket of jobs that doesn't even show up here. So some of the work was done by people who were employed by the schools already, right? Haven't tracked that data yet. We'll be getting data from the CEC on that. We don't think it's a huge amount, but it is some. So that doesn't appear here. So this is just for the K through 12 districts and the work that they contract to do as part of this project. So we can predict the jobs breakdown from this. As I said, we know the 30%, which is the sort of standard in construction for white collar. The blue collar piece is important because these are the workers that are covered by prevailing wage. This is why we're going to have decent wages on these projects. It also means that now any public works project, I think it's over $1,000, is required to report certified payroll records to the Department of Industrial Relations at the Labor Agency, which is good news for us because that means now we have actual data on who's working and how much money they're making. One of the challenges is to then match that data against CEC data, a complex series of calculations which we can go into more depth, but I think you probably aren't that interested in today. I'm happy to talk about it. The thing is that this is validating job estimates that are usually based on projections. So the challenge is that little red sliver, if you look up there for a minute, that's the data we actually have. That's the data we actually have. So you want me to come tell you about the jobs? I'm like, well, I'm telling you the universe of jobs. That's what we have. I can tell you that data actually gives us some useful information, which I will share with you. But so this is why I say we're excited about the future of job data collection. There's a reason. I mean, these projects, as we know, very long range, many just getting underway. There are issues. The state has just automated its certified payroll record accounting, and they'll get the information to us, and we're analyzing that with the University of California. So one of the challenges, this is all happening in real time, right? So as we get more data, we're going to be able to plug it in and actually make sure that our estimates are on target. I think the good news is that, again, this piece that we can measure represents the largest job gains that we'll have from any piece of Prop 39, and then based on what we know about those blue-collar jobs, we can extrapolate and really calculate the rest of the job impacts. So let me go on and say, what does that little sliver tell us? I don't want to go into tremendous detail, but we do have a little bit of information from that. We know, for example, that it's not enough data to validate jobs per million, which is how we count this, right? The jobs per million invested. But we can say something about the quality of jobs created, and eventually we'll be able to say something about access to those jobs, which I know is equally important to the number of jobs created, right? So when we know the zip codes that workers come from, for example, we know if we're targeting low-income communities and moving folks up into jobs out of those communities. So there's a variety of ways we can get at this. Right now, we know sort of roughly these are the kinds of building sectors that the hours worked refer to, led by HVAC, lighting, building envelope, no surprises here. The thing that's interesting, though, is that people, I think, who aren't in the construction industry don't get what kinds of jobs these are. So, I think I just shut that. There we go. So just to give you an idea by percentage, we're talking largely electricians, sheet metal workers, some asbestos workers. I mean, just there's a great diversity in the trades, which is also a good thing to see. Another thing that we know is that the wages are good. Now, this is an average of wages across these occupations for jobs that have actually reported payroll records. And what we know is that, and also I should say, in case you think these are extraordinarily high, this is total compensation, right? So this includes wages and benefits. And down the line, one thing we're going to be able to do is tease that apart and look at what benefits are coming with which jobs so that we can, again, this is a proxy for job quality, right? We don't want, if we're actually building jobs, we're not going to want to funnel people into, low-paying dead-end jobs, right? These are jobs that are career ladder jobs, and that's why the apprenticeship data is important. Because you think about pre-apprenticeship, which moves us into apprenticeship, which is a career pathway to a family-sustaining job in the economy. So it's not just a one-off sort of dead-of-night job. And here we see that the apprenticeship rates, about 19% now are apprentices. This is a good apprentice ratio. We exclude here, only the asbestos workers and one other are not actually running apprenticeships, but all the other trades are. And we have a pretty high level of apprenticeships in this work, which again is a proxy for career pathways and for job quality. This is a rough distribution, again, a pretty good geographic distribution, slightly different from some of the other slides you've seen, because this is just for those projects which are completed, and this becomes very wonky very quickly, but completed in terms of having submitted their certified payroll records to the Department of Industrial Relations. It doesn't mean they're completed and have submitted their forms to CEC. There are many universes of data which we have to combine here, but for the payroll records we do have, we're showing pretty good geographic distribution, and even I think as you see, a number of high-wage jobs coming out of regions of the state which are not known for having a lot of high-wage jobs. So that's, I think, pretty exciting to see. Finally, I wanted to revisit just very briefly the job projections, because people always ask about this, right? And I think it's important to remember the range, because one thing that happens is that we put out a formula that sort of forecasts, as with SB 73, and people assume that that's written in stone and that those jobs are here today now. It's an art and a science. This shows you the range. The low estimates, sort of from 3,000, say, roughly direct jobs, to the high estimate, 10,000 direct jobs, or if you want to talk about the total jobs, which is what we really care about in the economy, anywhere from 7 to 40,000, right? That's a huge range. So either way, wherever we fall on that spectrum, we'll see tremendous job impacts. I think it's important to remember that there is a tremendous range, because this is attributable to a couple things. One is different kinds of investments generate different kinds of job factors, right? So energy efficiency, solar, different kinds of generate different amounts and intensity of labor. We also know that the job multiplier, in other words, how we create indirect and induced jobs, that has a lot to do with a variety of other factors as well, including regional differences. So anywhere in here is a range. And I think that I was struck this morning as we were talking about energy savings that jobs like energy savings are a long game, right? We're looking for the future, and we're looking at a process that takes a long time to create and to measure and to track and to pay attention to quality as much as quantity. So happy to entertain questions, and we will have the full report that goes through all of this in much greater detail coming out next month.
Wonderful. Well, we'll look up.
Sure.
That report will be published in your website?
The report goes to the Citizens Oversight Board, and then they use it in their report to the legislature. So I'm not sure at what point that becomes public. I assume the Citizens Oversight Board will publish
We're
those.
interested in receiving a copy.
Absolutely. We'll make sure that happens.
Okay, wonderful. Then we'll be moving into
Thanks.
the next speaker, which is Arno Harris, and he is the member of the Proposition 39 Citizens Oversight Board that was created by the legislation as well to make sure our local citizens are involved in this process. And thank you for doing what you do and participating in this board. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Chair Hueso, for the invitation to join you for the hearing. As you said, my name is Arno Harris, and I'm an appointee to the Proposition 39 Citizens Oversight Board. Kate Gordon, our board chair, who I think received your original invitation, was unable to make it, and so I'm attending on her behalf. But I'm here today to update you on the progress of the board since our first meeting last fall, and to answer any questions you have about our activities to date. All the information I'll be presented, actually much of it you've heard already today, but all of it is also available on the Prop 39 Clean Energy Jobs Act website, which is hosted by the CEC. As you know, the Citizens Oversight Board was established through the California voters' approval of Prop 39 in 2012 and clarifying legislation that was signed by Governor Brown in June of 2013. The board's role is really to review fund expenditures and conduct independent audits of expenditures from the Job Creation Fund, and we then publish an accounting of annual expenditures as well as submit a program evaluation to the legislature with the first one coming out at the, with a goal of coming out at the end of March. The board is afforded one staff member and has about a $300,000 maximum annual budget to pay for auditors, legal advisors, administrative, and travel expenses. The board consists of 9 voting members and then 2 ex officio members. The state controller, the state treasurer, and the attorney general appoint 3 board members each, and the Energy Commission and the California PUC each contribute an ex officio member. The appointees represent a broad cross-section of people who bring their diverse experience in a range of different fields, from energy, contracting, schools, environment, labor, business, and other important stakeholder groups. The members of the board have more detailed bios on the website, but I'll briefly summarize just our quick roster. Former State Treasurer Bill Lockyer's appointees were Kate Gordon, who is our board chair. She comes from Climate and Sustainable Urbanization at the Paulson Institute. James Waukee Ray, who's an engineer and partner at Sanderson J. Ray Development. Stephen Sakurai, who's the Chief Financial Officer of the Yochadehi Winton Nation, as well as an adjunct professor at CSU Sacramento. Former State Controller John Chang had 3 appointees: Dana Cuff, Professor of Architecture and Urban Design at the University of California, Los Angeles; Gary Kremen, Clean Technology Engineer, entrepreneur; and he also appointed Eric Emblem, who sadly is recently passed and will be replaced with a new appointment from the State Controller's office soon. And then finally, Attorney General Kamala D. Harris had 3 appointees. I was one of her appointees, and a founder and former chief executive of Recurrent Energy. Shalina Odbert, who's the co-founder and executive director of the Current Key Design Initiative, and Randall Martinez, EVP and chief operating officer of Cordoba Corporation. The 2 ex officio members are Chair Weisenmiller of the California Energy Commission and President Picker of the PUC, who join us at our meetings. The Citizens Oversight Board was first convened on September 8 of 2015. Since then, we've had 2 additional meetings. Detailed meeting agendas and minutes are all available on the Prop 39 website. Our first meeting was primarily focused on getting the board up to speed, and we had a joint agency presentation on Prop 39 that covered activities to date and an overview of the role and responsibilities of the board. We also selected our chair, Kate Gordon, and vice chair, James Ray, and we were briefed on the restrictions placed on board members by Bagley-Keene and the Brown Act. And of course, while these restrictions serve important purposes, they also, I'm sure you can appreciate, create some challenges for us in terms of moving forward quickly, but we've been working on doing that. And then finally, we heard from a number of the LEAs, the local educational agencies, about their experience to date qualitatively with Prop 39 process, the opportunities it has provided them, and some of the challenges they've faced as they've tried to implement it. One question that came up at that first meeting was with regard to the perception that a fair amount of time had passed since the Act passed, since the proposition passed in 2012, and our first convening in 2015. And the CEC staff explained that the timeline that I think you saw earlier, but basically, with the Act, with the proposition passing in 2012, the clarifying legislation not getting signed into law until 2013, the CEC then had to put the program guidelines together, and that took until December of 2013. Then the program was essentially open to schools. Schools have to go through a planning process. They plan, they apply to get planning support. They develop their programs. Then they submit an application. Hopefully that application gets approved. Then what we discovered is they typically go back to their school boards as part of their annual planning process to put that into the budget for the following year. So despite the program being open for business on January 2014, it takes some time for the schools to incorporate those dollars into their activities and get started. So the Citizens Oversight Board itself is tasked with auditing actual dollars spent, and because we haven't had any completed projects, no dollars have actually been dispersed until 2015, and that's the reason then why the board itself was not convened until 2015, and we're just now getting up to speed and preparing our first report on the program. Our second meeting was held on November 11th of 2015. We heard from the Department of Education, California Conservation Corps, California Workforce Development on many of the aspects of the programs that you've heard about today. Another one of the key issues that came up at that point is the challenge that we've faced in trying to find legal representation for the board because of the fact that the CEC's legal office, the AG's office, and several other agencies that we've approached are conflicted because they either represent agencies that are involved in implementing the program or they represent applicants to the program. And for that reason, all of them felt they were conflicted in representing the board because of our oversight responsibilities with the program. So we're working on that. We're hopeful that we've identified some state agencies that aren't conflicted, and we'll be getting advice soon. But the fact that we don't have legal advice has been a challenge for us in terms of moving forward quickly.
You mentioned that was in the budget.
Sorry?
You mentioned that was in the budget, the legal advice.
That's correct. We have a $300,000 total or maximum annual budget that's afforded us to pay for legal and auditor and other services. And I think the goal has first been to find out if there's a way to do it through a state agency. And my understanding is that's a.
You have the AG in there.
Sorry?
You have the AG participating in the
Yeah.
panel and making appointments, so maybe that would be something that needs to be looked at.
My understanding is the AG's office, we did approach them early on, and they felt they were conflicted because they often represent many of the LEAs themselves. So we're hopeful. I think it's just more of a startup issue for us as we're moving along, and we're hopeful that we're going to resolve it soon. But it's been a challenge for us in convening and then getting ready to prepare our reports, getting good advice.
Okay, very well. But you know, they don't represent all of them, and maybe they can, whenever that conflict arises, they can probably hire a legal counsel.
We'll certainly explore that further.
If you can summarize your presentation.
Yeah, just I think the latest meeting, we've received our first report. You heard today from the Chancellor's office. We received that report. Our first report will be based on that report plus two others that are coming from other agencies. And we're in the process now of, we formed subcommittees and we're working on putting together both the audit and finding and defining the scope of the audit, hiring auditors, and we're also in the process of digesting the reports as we receive them from the various supporting agencies so that we can put our report together in time for the end of March, which is our goal. And it's a challenge, I think, given the timeline and just getting a new entity up to speed, but we're hopeful that we'll get that report out and have something for the legislator to look at soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. I don't have any questions, any additional questions, so we're going to move on to the next panel.
All right.
We're going to move to the school energy efficiency projects from the testimony of the actual districts that have been participating in the program, and we have several that are joining us here today. Eric Blake, he's the legislative advocate for the Los Angeles Unified School District, and if I could ask everyone to come up to the seats that we have.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Maybe we can make another chair available. Dale McCurry, the energy manager of the Santa Ana Unified School District. Terry Ryan, the facilities director with the Salinas City Elementary School District. Jose D. Nunez, the vice chancellor of facilities planning with the maintenance and operations with the San Mateo Community College District. And Pablo Manso, the associate vice chancellor of facilities management with Dos Rios Community College District. And maybe you can give us just a brief overview of your participation. We could go according to that list, beginning with Mr. Bach, and then McCurry, then Ryan, then Nunez, and Manso.
Great, thank you very much. Eric Bakke, as you said, with the Los Angeles Unified School District, pleased to share some of the positive things that are occurring in our district, and this program is certainly one of those. I had a 30-minute presentation to provide, but maybe I'll cut it short. Knowing that we are short on time, I don't have a 30-minute presentation.
Maybe remove the zero.
Just real quick, I'll just go through these slides very quickly. I just wanted to highlight some of the main components that we look at. You know, when we started identifying schools, we quickly realized that our issues were mostly related with our high schools. They've got the greatest use, they have the largest energy consumption, highest energy costs. They also tend to be some of our older schools. So when we started this program, there was a lot of learning through that, but what we found is that the lighting projects, the HVAC projects, the control systems and the plumbing were the types of projects that generated the highest opportunity for us. This is the flow chart, a selection criteria that we used in evaluating. I won't go through that, but it's there in the documentation. If you have any questions about it, happy to answer questions about it. This I wanted to kind of illustrate a little bit. This is our schedule, how we propose to implement our Prop 39 programs, and we've broken it into 5 phases for 5 years, and we look at each phase by segment. We identify the selection, we conduct the industry grade audit to evaluate what are their energy opportunities. But as a school district, we still have to go through formal processes of bidding. We have to go through formal process of board approval. Then we have to submit projects to DSA if the project warrants it. We have to have architects design the project. All of that, then we have to then figure out how to coordinate it and schedule it. We have schools that are operating in some cases year-round, some cases we have to operate after hours, on weekends. So there's a lot of coordination and scheduling that goes on into the implementation. So it just can't happen overnight. It's not a very quick process, as much as we would like to think it could be. And then the construction, that generally isn't very lengthy. The construction projects, are generally light retrofits, recommissionings, HVAC replacements, things that we can work within the schedule. And then the blue bar is the post verification, measuring that the equipment is in fact operating the way at the efficiency levels it's supposed to. We actually, the Prop 39 program requires a 12-year review. We're doing a 2-year, just to make sure that, a new part works great for the first few months, but then it might, fade in terms of its efficiency level. So we really are going to be evaluating it for a full 2 years to make sure that we are getting the benefit. We work with ESCO companies that guarantee that the rate of return that we expect on these projects will actually materialize, and they provide a guarantee for us to ensure that. That's a very critical piece. The bottom slide just represents the timing and the allocations that we receive from Prop 39 as it relates to the construction level. So the green line represents the timing in which we receive our annual allocations, and then the purple line represents the time frame as it correlates with the phasing each year of when we are completing our projects. What we decided to do for our presentation was kind of break it out a little bit. We've heard a lot of conversation about jobs. We've heard a lot of conversation about, how much it costs for types of the project. So we broke it out even further, and what you'll see here is we have a pie chart that breaks out that the district over its 5 years is estimating that we'll receive roughly $120 million. Right now we received $26 million the first year, $22 million the second year, and $20 million in the third. That seems to be trending down, so it's highly unlikely we'll see $26 million the next 2 years, but that's what we forecasted. What we've looked at in the earlier stages so far, we're projecting that about 77% of our allocation will be directed to direct construction. Those would be the lights, the HVAC systems, and the installations of such. But then we also break it out in terms of the energy audit, and you can see there the design costs for our architects, the fees for our contractors, but our architects and inspectors. There was an earlier conversation about the workforce, and I thought I would just share real briefly. When you look at the indirect jobs, there's jobs, at DSA in terms of the review. There's jobs in terms of asbestos abatement that's necessary when you get into some of these older buildings. You've got to clean out and deal with asbestos when you're working with HVAC systems and the installation of the lights even. You have material testings and labs and construction inspectors. So there is an army of folks working behind the scenes that may not necessarily be directly related to the Prop 39 project, but they are contributing to the success of the program. We further broke it out by, we've done 2 projects in our first phase last year, and we're in the middle of phase 2, which includes 11 projects. As you can see, our SIR, we talked to some of the panels before, talked about that. In the first phase, we were required for each project to be above 1.05 for K-12s. By the time we got into phase 2, there was a little bit more flexibility that 1.5 would apply to the full expenditure plan. And so as you see here, we have projects that are below the 1.05, and then we have some that are far exceeding it. Overall, the total of that package is a 1.05. And then what we tried to do is break out what each project type is for each of the school sites and what the energy savings is. Again, this is just a further breakout to talk about what the cost differential is per type of project. So we've pretty much split this every which way you can imagine to give you a full representation of how the Prop 39 dollars are being spent. And then finally, I think I just touch on 2 more slides. This one just lets you know that what we have seen in the 13 projects that we've designed and are under construction for, we're already anticipating a 28% savings in our electricity, a 19% savings in our gas, giving us a total annual savings at these 13 school sites of savings of about 26%. We anticipate that over the course of the program, we're going to see about almost a $6 million estimated savings between our gas and electric, which will be able to be reinvested back into, in our case, our deferred maintenance program, which has been crippled over the last several years. I know there's a lot of discussion about the cost, and what we hope to do is we look at that as not savings, but cost avoidance. We're avoiding spending the money, spending it on the utility costs, but we're able to reallocate those dollars where they're necessary to reinvest. The benefits we talked about already, about the jobs, we're estimated about 550 jobs will be created. Those are the direct jobs, but again, I touched on some of the jobs that aren't calculated that are going to be contributed to that. I talked already about the savings. And the other benefits go beyond. The improved classroom environment is something that we haven't talked a lot about, and that is critical here. I actually attended a school site in San Juan Unified here locally, and they actually put a single school where they were using the Prop 39 funds, and one side of the classroom had the original lights, and then they installed new LED on the other half of the classroom. And it's a bad pun, but it's like night and day. It was a very, very oppressive environment before, and then afterwards it is bright and sunny. And it was a very cloudy day, and you can see how that's going to make a big impact on the kids' performance in class. I really believe that. We also found that by the replacement of using the Prop 39 dollars, we're finding that we're replacing or we're lowering some of our maintenance costs. What we're looking at is we're reducing or eliminating some of the old, outdated, non-functioning mechanical systems. So we don't have to spend as much time in terms of our manpower going back and repairing those each and every 3, 6, 12 months of the year. We can redirect those resources to other things, so it provides some additional savings there. And then there was a discussion about the Conservation Corps. I just wanted to share, and it was raised a little bit. LA Unified has provided an MOU recently, working with both the state and the LA. We're really excited about this program, and I think you hit it, Senator, on the reasons why we should be doing this. It's giving these kids an opportunity that otherwise they may not have. I mean, not every child is a book learner. Every child should have an opportunity, and here's a great opportunity under this program to partner up with the Conservation Corps. Our MOU creates an opportunity where we'll be doing 30 non-cost energy audits of our schools. And then on top of it, in that, we're going to be incorporating 60 to 80 of our high school students to participate in those audits, both on the front end and on the back end for measurement. So we're really excited about creating that opportunity for the kids, and so far it hasn't taken off yet, but the MOU was recently signed, so we're really looking forward to that opportunity. So. And just real quick, while I've got the microphone, there was one question that was asked about our relationship with the IOUs. I think it was Senator Wolk asked that question. I had emailed my colleagues down in the district to find out what's happening locally. The Department of Water and Power is looking at doing a 2% 2.5% rate hike for water and a 4.5% rate hike in electricity. That will be each year for the next 5 years. So we're looking at a 22% rate hike in our electricity costs. So these dollars that are being avoided really could be eaten up in those rate hikes. So these dollars are very critical because otherwise additional dollars are going to have to come out of a district's general fund to cover the costs that are necessary today. So I just wanted to share that with you. Thank you very much.
Great presentation. This is really the meat and potatoes of this presentation, so I really appreciate you sharing that information with us at that level, because I think you, if some of the senators were here, you would answer a lot of their questions. So thank you. We'll go down
Thank you.
to Dale McCurry.